structure of spinal cord. Now, what is this spinal cord? Spinal cord is made up of nerves and cells that carry messages from the periphery to the brain and vice versa. It is elongated and cylindrical structure which is of 45 centimeter in length approximately. It occupies the upper two-third portion of the vertebral column. The extent of this spinal cord is from upper border of the C1 to lower border of L1. Now in case of adults, this spinal cord ends at the lower border of L1 in the form of conus medullaris, you can see here. So this is the lower tapering end which is filled with CSF. In case of newborns, it ends at L3 and up to third month of intrauterine life, it occupies the whole length of the vertebral column or vertebral canal. Now the various parts of the spinal cord is depending upon its position or location in the body. So it has cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal parts. Cervical part is lying in the neck region, thoracic is lying in the thorax region, lumbar is just covering this abdominal and pelvic region, then sacral part is in the pelvic region, then coccygeal is again the lowermost part of this spinal cord. So accordingly, no doubt it is ending at the level of L1, but still we divide it because it is going to give the number of origin to the number of spinal nerves. So we just divide that spinal cord's part according to that. That is, the different parts are just corresponding to the different spinal nerves which are arising from the spinal cord. Now what is this spinal segment? The part of the spinal cord giving origin to the rootlets of one spinal nerve on both sides constitutes one spinal segment. You can see here the different rootlets, they are arising from this, they are just forming the one spinal nerve. So this segment of the spinal cord which is giving origin to the different rootlets forming one single spinal nerve is given the name one spinal segment. Now several spinal nerves, they emerge out of each segment of the spinal cord. So keeping in mind this structure, so there are 8 pairs of cervical spinal nerves, 5 pairs of lumbar spinal nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic spinal nerves and 5 pairs of sacral spinal nerves and 1 pair of coccygeal spinal nerve. Then coming to the coverings of the spinal cord, it is covered by meninges. The meninges are dura mater, arachnoid and pia mater. The dura mater is a single layered which is present up to S2. Arachnoid is again avascular present up to S2. Pia mater is highly vascular and it has extensions. So what are those extensions? So that is filum terminale, which is the extension beyond the conus medullaris. So this is the filum terminale which is going to attach to the coccygeal vertebra. Then comes the linea suppletans, ligamentum denticulatum, then subarachnoid septum. A word about ligamentum denticulatum. These are the basically 21 pairs of triangular ligaments which are extending from the spinal cord on each side between the anterior and posterior root of the spinal nerves to spinal dura mater. So this is the TS which is showing the attachment of this ligamentum denticulatum, and this is basically the triangular structure which is extending from the spinal cord to the spinal dura mater. Now this ligamentum denticulatum is it helps in fixing the position of the spinal cord. Then comes the linea suppletans. It is a longitudinal glistening band of the tissue on the anterior surface of the spinal cord which is formed by the thickening of the pia mater along the anterior median fissure. So I told you the spinal segment, that is the part of spinal cord giving origin to the rootlet of one spinal nerve. They constitute one spinal segment. So there are 31 spinal segments are there. They do not correspond with the vertebral segments. So just to know the lesion, they lie just above the numerically corresponding vertebral spine because we can feel the vertebral spines. If we want to know the lesion at what level the spinal cord is injured, so this formula you should keep in mind. For in the cervical region we just add 1. So if the C5 cervical spine is visible, at this level the C6 spinal segment is lying. In upper thoracic, that is in if it is T2, we add 2 to that, that is it will become T4. Then in lower thoracic we add 3, at 11 thoracic spine we add the 4, and 12 thoracic spine we add the 6, and first lumbar spine we just add the requisite number. Now coming to the enlargements which are present in the spinal cord, the two enlargements are seen, that is cervical and lumbar. Cervical is visible from C4 to T2. Majority is basically C5 to T1, but some contribution for the brachial plexus is from C4 and sometime from the T2. So we just take a range, that is C4 to T2, which is widest at the C6 and it is around 38 millimeter in size. Now lumbar is extending from L2 to S3, which is widest at S1 and it is of 35 millimeter in size. So why this enlargement is there? Sorry. Now this is the reason: due to greater number of nerve cells and connections needed to process sensory and motor information for the limbs. So in the cervical enlargement, we know that the brachial plexus is contributed by C5 to T1. So we just take a broad term, that is it is located from C4 to T2. So it is extendable to T2. Normally we take C4 to T1. Now it serves the upper limb. Near lumbar region, we take it L to S3 and it serves the lower limb. So the how much mass is supplied by the spinal nerve, depending upon that the enlargement is there. So the number at that particular position, the greater number of nerve cells they will be present. So that's why the enlargements are there. Coming to the external feature of the spinal cord, if we see the TS, it has longitudinal fissure, that is anterior median fissure, then anterolateral fissure from where the anterior root is coming out, then there is the posterior median sulcus is there, then posterolateral sulcus is there from where the posterior root is entering. Now coming to the TS of the spinal cord, it has inner core of gray matter which is surrounded by outer covering, we call it as white matter. Now the gray matter is H-shaped pillar, you can see in the structure, which has anterior and posterior gray columns. It is anterior, this is the posterior gray column. So these anterior and posterior gray column, they are connected with each other through the gray commissure. Now this gray commissure is basically, it contains the central canal. The gray matter which is lying posterior to the central canal, we call it as posterior gray commissure. The gray matter which is lying anterior to the central canal, we call it as anterior or ventral gray commissure. The lower end of this central canal, it expands to form the terminal ventricle which is occupying the position in conus medullaris. So this central canal is filled with CSF and it is lined by the ependyma, which is ciliated columnar epithelium. Now in certain regions of the thoracic and upper lumbar region, the lateral gray columns are also present. Now this gray matter is made up of what? It is made up of nerve cells and the processes, neuroglia, then blood vessels. Now this is the TS of the spinal cord. If we observe it from sacral to the upper cervical segment, we can see the amount of gray and white matter is changing. So the white matter is increasing from sacral to the upper cervical region, and the gray matter is showing the maximum bulk at those level, which is going to supply the you can say the bulk mass of the tissue or limbs. So relative amount of gray and white matter vary at different level. Amount of gray matter can be correlated with the mass of tissue supplied. Amount of white matter undergo progressive increase from sacral to the cervical segment as we proceed upward. So reason is more and more ascending tracts are added as we pass upward, and the descending tracts, they decreases as we go down the cord. So this is the reason why the white matter in the lower segments, that is in less amount, and in the upper segment it is in bulk. Now the types of neurons which are present in the gray matter, if we see, that is structurally we have two types, that is Golgi type 1 and Golgi type 2. Golgi type 1, they are long axons leave through the anterior root, and Golgi type 2, they are short axon and they are intersegmental. Functionally, so there are three, that is motor neuron, sensory neuron and interneuron, and further classification of the motor neuron is alpha and gamma. Alpha is large multipolar cells and gamma is small multipolar neurons. Coming to the different nuclei which are present in the gray matter, so in the anterior gray column, so there are 5 sets of nuclei, which is lateral, then medial group, then spinal accessory, phrenic, and at certain segment I told you, so where the bulk of gray matter is present, that is lumbosacral nucleus is also seen in the lower part of the spinal cord. Now neurons are large and multipolar, and axons they pass out in the anterior nerve root as alpha efferent. Now the further classification of this lateral and medial group, you can see this is ventrolateral, dorsolateral, retrodorsolateral. Then comes the ventromedial and dorsomedial nucleus. So these are the group of cells which are present in the anterior gray column. Now cells which are present in the posterior gray column, these are the substantia gelatinosa, nucleus proprius, nucleus dorsalis or Clark's columns or dorsal nucleus of Clark's, and fourth is the visceral efferent nucleus which are present just lateral to this dorsal nucleus. Now substantia gelatinosa, little information about this nucleus is that it is situated at the apex. What is important is it is present throughout the length of the spinal cord. It is composed mainly of Golgi type 2 neurons, and what is the function? It is basically receiving the efferent fibers which are taking the information of pain, touch and temperature from posterior root. Then comes the nucleus proprius. So this is present anterior to the substantia gelatinosa. It is the main bulk of cells which are present in the posterior gray column. You can see the size of this nucleus. It is again present throughout the length of the spinal cord like the substantia gelatinosa. It is receiving the fibers from the posterior white column. So posterior white column is basically meant for, we all know, that is it is associated with proprioception, 2-point discrimination and vibration. Then dorsal nucleus of Clark's, nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column is what? So it is seen only in a region of the spinal cord that is which is extending from C8 to L3 or L4. So it is present at the base of the posterior column. You can see it is present here, base of the posterior column. So what is the function of this? It is associated with the proprioceptive endings, that is proprioceptive information which is coming through neuromuscular spindles or tendon spindles. Then visceral efferent nucleus is there, which is lying lateral to the dorsal nucleus of Clark's. So this type of nucleus is visible from T1 to L3 segment of the spinal cord, and it is taking the visceral information. That is, the visceral efferent information is coming and it is just receiving that. Now I told you in the previous slide that at some segment of the spinal cord the intermediolateral group of cells are also seen. So we call them as lateral gray column cells. So the part of the cell which is present from T1 to L2 or L3, so they are giving rise to the preganglionic sympathetic fibers, and the part of the gray column which is present at the level of S2, S3, S4, they are giving rise to the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers. Coming to the white matter, now this is divided into different columns. This is the posterior white column, this is lateral white column, this is anterior white column, and this white matter is made up of nerve fibers, neuroglia and blood vessels. So it is white. Why? Because it is due to the myelinated axons of the neuron. Because nerve cell bodies, they are lying in this, giving, or you can say, we have discussed the different nuclei which are present in this gray column. So they are made up of collection of neurons, nerve cell body of the neurons, and the axons they are running in the white matter. So this is the whole internal structure of the spinal cord. It has posterior horn, you can see number 1. It has anterior horn, it has intermediate zone or intermediate gray column, then it has lateral horn, then it has posterior funiculus, this is the posterior column, then anterior funiculus or anterior column, then lateral funiculus or lateral column, then tract of Lyseau. Tract of Lyseau is basically when the fibers are entering into the spinal cord, they ascend or descend for some distance. So that segmental, or you can say intersegmental neurons which are ascending or descending, they are just forming the tract of Lyseau. Then anterior median fissure, then posterior median sulcus, then from where the anterior root is coming, the axons which are coming here, this is anterolateral sulcus. The part where the posterior root is entering into the spinal cord, this is the posterolateral sulcus, and this is the posterior intermediate sulcus which is just dividing the fasciculus, gracilis and cuneatus tracts. So this is all about the, or you can say, the introduction of the spinal cord, of the structure of the spinal cord. Thank you very much.